Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, my dear brothers and sisters and viewers of IQRA TV. I hope you had a nice short break. You had a nice cup of chai or coffee or whatever it is, and you joined us again for the second part of the Real Talk program. I'm your host, Iqbal Bhana. I've now been joined by somebody who was with me last week, so viewers will be familiar with Anwar Fatima, who was here, as I said, last week, who was here for talking about the post-election, the day before the election, what we as a Muslim community needed to do to make sure that we got the right people in power at that particular moment in time. Anwar, thank you for coming. Welcome. Join us again. I hope you've not had a difficult time getting here. Sorry you missed the first part of the program.
Yeah, I'm sorry too.
Obviously, you were very passionate last week about the election, and people needed to go out and cast their vote and make sure they use the democratic process. What's your take on the outcome of the election? Can I ask you that first?
Yeah, absolutely. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. I have to say that I think a lot of people knew deep down inside that the propaganda machine had been working really hard to get this idea of demonizing people, certain people, obviously the party leader for the Labour Party. And after the results, I mean, I didn't even stay awake, and it's usually tradition for me to stay awake throughout the night, watch the the elections and see what the progression is, and slowly throughout the country realise the results. But for this year, it felt as though everything was just a facade, and it really taken the momentum away from what our real achievements
are. So you
are.
just deeply disappointed when you
Absolutely.
got up in the morning and found out the result?
Yeah, I mean, and I knew it. I knew Bradford would be secured because we came out fighting a few of the other districts, but the reality on the ground of how people are so easily influenced. I mean, Boris Johnson's father was talking about what his views are on the general public. And it was like a gob-stopping moment whereby it was horrific, some of the terminology that he used, like they're stupid and you wouldn't want to give them anything really tangible to make a decision on. So if that's the Tory party leader's father's view of us, you can imagine what the Tory party leader thinks of everybody else, generally speaking.
I mean, obviously he's not here to answer those questions, but somebody sent me a WhatsApp message about one of the TV appearances he made with Judge Rinder, and who absolutely laid into him when he talked about Muslim women being fighter pilots, etc., and wearing the niqab. But we won't go into that. I mean, obviously it's happened. We now have a government, a Conservative government, led by Boris Johnson, with a huge majority, so they can do whatever they want within in terms of passing whatever legislation they want, and they can shape the future policies and services of this country. And whatever they do is going to have a huge impact on the 4 million Muslims who live in this country. Right? Whether you're practicing Muslims or you're not, but it's going to have a huge impact, whether we like it or not, in terms of all the support services. We know Islamophobia is a major issue for us.
Yes.
Right? And it's getting worse day by day, as Yusuf has said in the first part. Between the two of you, what are the key challenges in terms of the issues that face the Muslim community on a day-to-day basis? Is it health? Is it education? Is it employment? Is it opportunity? A level playing field, etc. What are the challenges that the Muslim community faces?
Shall I go first?
Go first. Yeah.
For me personally, I have a sibling who's very ill. She has a severe heart condition. So for those reasons, naturally, my inclination would be to what is the health service going to be like post-election. So on the way here, actually, I hadn't really listened to the news today because it was a really chocker day. But the fact that the Tories, within a few days, are already talking about, how they're going to facilitate for the nurses, and there's no facilitation. They are going to put more pressures on them that they don't need. Sometimes previously they used to allow
the
a
government
bursary.
Said they're going to get 50,000
so
nurses into the system.
So that was one of the
19,500 or so, 19,000 are
so they've already
U-turned
on that within a couple of days already, saying that it's not fair that the nurses get to have a bursary and don't pay their university fees. Well, actually no, it's only fair because they spend thousands and thousands of hours in work experience and volunteering their time, which means that first of all they can't work to subsidise any of their fees anyway during, I mean, a lot of students have the opportunity to work part-time as well and sort of help themselves, whereas that's not the case for nurses. And we've already got nurses protesting in Northern Ireland today,
yes.
and for the next couple of days or whatever. If that's going to start happening in the UK, we really need to take a look at the whole of the system and say, where are we supporting the NHS? If they're saying
so
that they're going to be able to retain...
It's a fear for you, the NHS and the health service.
Absolutely, because it's priority if we haven't got a healthy
But the NHS
society.
the NHS was one of the major talking points in the election campaign.
Yeah.
And yet, the public...
The first thing that they do is announce that, you know.
But the public didn't really catch on to that.
No.
So, obviously it didn't resonate with the majority of the public. So do you think it was Brexit that really took on the main thinking for the ordinary person, that they want to get Brexit done, as Boris Johnson said?
Absolutely.
But the rest of the issues, do you think, issues around, we've talked about health in your case, education, employment opportunities, entrepreneurship. Yusuf, I mean, you work with a lot of young people as well.
I think one of the key things is, you just touch on that, is the equality in employment, because Muslims have suffered. I don't want to bore you with it, Muslim men 75% unlikely to get a job as the equivalent non-Muslim. Muslim women 65%. If your name is Mohammed, your chances of your insurance policy is 300. So I think those are key for the incumbent government to look at if we're really going to look at delivering for all communities. And the community's apprehension is that, look, we've already suffered, forget about hate crime, we're suffering from this level of discrimination, and then the deprivation. Muslims live in some of the most deprived areas. Not only are they suffering from a deprivation aspect in terms of housing, but social kind of inclusion as well. That's a key issue. The other one is Brexit. There's a real uncertainty in not just the Muslims but the wider community. We've signed up for Brexit. We don't know what Brexit will mean. There's an uncertainty about the economic and opportunities future. So that's playing a key part in the concerns of the community.
I mean, you work very closely across the whole of the country with many Muslim communities. Some of the policies that we have in this country around sort of employment rights for people, etc., the standards of some of the goods and services we get are European derived. But do you see that coming out of Europe, there could be a sort of downward spiral of lowering standards for the services and the goods and other stuff that we buy in this country, where the standards will be lowered, in your view?
Potentially, yes, because members of this government have been talking about not just the economic aspects, but getting rid of the Human Rights Charter, which is key. And we were the drivers of the European Human Rights Charter after the Second World War, and it served us well, contrary to what people think. Not only is it
and the Court of Justice as well.
And the Court of Justice. So if we get rid of those as a start-off point, we're going backwards rather than forwards. For me, and the concerns of many people who are human rights advocates feel we can't do that, whether they're judges or students. I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a concern about where do we go when we leave Europe, which kind of the standards gets affected. But I think prices is going to play a big part. The average person is unsure. For example, one of the things as a parent is the affordability of holidays. Although it's difficult when you've got a family, will it get worse? Because you're going to have to pay for a visa. Your landing tax for your aircraft as soon as it lands at the other side is going to be expensive. You're going to lose out the whole economics of scale opportunities in buying in a big quantity because you're a part of the EU.
No, I mean,
we're buying stuff
the country argument by Brexiters would be, no, that's rubbish. No. It's going to get cheaper. But I mean, we won't debate that at this moment in time. But much more importantly, I mean, Fatima, you work with young people. You got a family. You're born in Bradford. You got a.
I was born in Kashmir.
Sorry, you were born in Kashmir. My
literally
apologies.
raised here since a very young age.
But you have a strong network in this community.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, as you say, you're very much sort of tuned to the fabric, and the connectivity within Bradford. How do you, in your area, in your circle of friends, the community, how have they responded to this election result and its outcome?
I think a lot of people are down, quite depressed about it, and hopefully not losing hope, because we have to get ourselves motivated to the point where we're prepared to better prepared for the next bout. But there's one thing that I have to really highlight here, that the whole system has to be changed, because it's not fair. It's not fair when you're demonizing people who have been working for years and years on civil rights, human rights, programs, and then it takes a couple of newspaper articles for this one person to be deemed as a racist and a fascist and all kinds of other things. It's not right. There has to be something placed into legislation whereby the media are brought to accountability for what they can put a spin on things, really, in order for it to go a certain way. And that's clear. That's clear in everything that they've done. All the breaking news articles and stuff like that were completely fabricated. There's no real tangible sort of evidence to say that anything of what they said was remotely truth. There's other things for me as well, personally. I think that there's something that we need to look at, especially a form that's taken in America. It's called lobbying, and I think those are strong areas for Muslims to look at as well. That we
but before you came and joined us, Yusuf and I spoke about this. Whereas the Jewish community and the Hindu community and the Sikh community to a certain extent are united, the Muslim community is completely divided.
Yeah.
So how is that going to happen?
Well, I think
if you want to do lobbying, we have organizations like the MCB, for example, who have been in existence for many, many years, and other organizations, but we still have not made inroads.
Yeah. And
if you look at the MCB, which has got 400 affiliates, I believe, I understand, across the whole of the country, and they're not on the table. The government has completely shunned them. So where is the Muslim voice in the government?
Well, this is what, for somebody like me as a youth and community development worker, I think encouraging young people to perhaps take that route and be confident in learning about politics. It's not as daunting as it would seem. I mean, my background has nothing to do with politics at all, and I literally sat for, while being a stay-at-home parent, of looking at things that really affect us. At first it was cuts.
I mean, you're a mother of young people, teenagers, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Your teenagers. You were saying last week that there were the 16-year-old, was it, who were having an election in the
they were engaging in an election in the school.
And as a part of that election process, they were thinking of voting for our friend, the leader of the Brexit party, right? And these are young Muslim boys. Okay. Now, maybe that was a joke for them, but we're now into serious times, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
So have you had a discussion with your sons to say,
Beta, we did actually. We were talking about, the fact that the power hasn't shifted really, and how this is going to affect future generations. And he fully understands that equality for all is paramount to our being here. You can't say that it's equal for some and not for others, really. It's a bit like Animal Farm and George Orwell's books. We can't, as Muslims, we cannot say that it's survival of the fittest, because that's not what Islam is about. Islam is about raising people's morale and bringing people together collectively. In Bradford particularly, I have to mention B4B, because I've been part of it from the offset. And with that, we have so many good projects going on, whereby we're going into schools, we're talking to young people, we're advocating engagement, really. And unless people sit down and have dialogue and have that inclusion on a grassroots level, there are things, I think there's prefects at school that are elected and whatnot.
The issue around engaging with other communities and young people. Within the Muslim community itself, the young people within the Muslim community, like your sons, 16, 17, 18, whoever, there seems to be a lot of apathy, in the democratic process. Now, how do we, change that? How do we make them realize that their presence in the voting booth is absolutely vital if we're going to make a change to the nation, to the way it should be, following the principles of Islam, as you've just said.
I mean, I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised to see so many young Pakistani, Asian, Muslim people coming out to vote, and predominantly they were female.
Right.
I have to say that I think the females are taking a lead in that, and quite proud to say that they are a little bit more concerned about what happens and being engaged in and having a say. I think boys are a little bit more, it has to be really tangible for them. And maybe in bite sizes, I'm not really too sure. All I can say is from my experience with my two boys, that they are excited about coming of age and then being able to vote. And it's about relating to them, how it's going to affect them. And I think the biggest thing for my boys right now is the ability to go out and then earn money. And they know that definitely if you have higher education, you're going to have the capacity to earn a better living wage. And so for those reasons, they are, encouraged to stay on in education as well. I think sometimes for young people, when things go wrong in terms of academia, we've talked about education before, when young people fall through the net, especially young men, and they don't have any kind of safety net in terms of where their education leads, traineeship, all that kind of stuff, they don't have the encouragement. And we were talking about this before, that within our community we don't have that safety net as well as other communities. They really encourage and really work with their youth. And I know, like, in terms of
in the past, we've said the government has devastated the youth service, etc. Okay, let's put the government aside to one minute.
This is what I'm saying. There's so many organisations that themselves organise youth events. I know the Jewish community are very, very, very up on this. They really take care of their youth. They engage with them, they nurture them, they praise them. These are the kinds of things that should naturally come to us because of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. But we're not doing that. I think we need to put focus into that, really.
So just taking that on board, Yusuf, you work with Muslim organisations across Greater Manchester, and you have a number of council of mosques in the area, don't you? I remember attending a meeting with several council of mosques. How can the council of mosques influence the next generation to be much more proactive? Or what can the council of mosques do, or individual mosques do, within the communities to do what Anwar has just said about setting up youth groups within the community themselves? Do we have the ability, the resources, or the intention of doing that, or not?
Before I answer that, we were talking about earlier about the impact of the elections, and one of the important things that came out of the elections for me was, or this election previous, was the number of BME councillors has improved immensely. Manchester nationally, and in fact women are probably the best represented. So that's a positive. Going back to what you said, one of the other things I picked up from a infogram was, if you look at the election, the voting, individuals up to the age of about 24 to 30, there was parity between Labour and Conservative. Once you get beyond that, the gap was astounding. As you get older, the voting was more Tory. So there was a huge gap as you got older. In fact, when you got to 75 plus, almost 80% of people who voted Tory. So, but going back to your original point is, I think one of the things we can do as a community is we need to build the resilience of the organisations that we have, because that is clearly lacking. And going back to the point you're making about the Council of Mosques, I think it's hugely important that we create the environment for our young to develop and not have an apathy approach to where they are. How we build that will depend on how much we invest, because I feel one of the things we've been poor at as a community is actually investing in those areas
within our community.
We, for example, we spend a lot of money on other things, and I won't go into it. But if we spend 1%, absolutely. Well, we've got 1,200 mosques. I think, I think we've got enough mosques now.
Right.
I think what we need to do is invest in key organisations. For example, organisations, think tanks, academia, and then invest in structures to help the youth, because austerity is going to have a big impact on us, even contrary to what Mr. Johnson says. For example, in the criminal justice, we're talking of 20,000 police officers. We lost 21,000. To get those 20,000 officers, because I'm an ex-police officer, to get them up to speed, it's going to take you 3 years, and you're going to tie up potentially at least 10,000 officers with that. So you're going to be
train them up.
You're going to be 10,000 below where you are now,
Mm-hmm.
and that is going to be spread across the civil service, the probation services, the health service. So austerity and Brexit is still going to have an impact on us going forward.
Mm. I mean, obviously, those are some of the major challenges for us,
Yes.
you know, in terms of where we go. But let me focus about. I mean, we've got limited time. What would you like to see in a very short time the government to do immediately in the next 3 months for the Muslim community?
Well, I definitely want them to start an investigation about the Islamophobia within the party. I want that definitely addressed.
Right.
Baroness Avasi has said that time and time again. I want that delivered firstly. It gives us reassurance somewhat into this government that they will be just, basically just, and then moving forward that they don't shortchange us with our NHS, and that people's health is of paramount importance, really.
In your view,
I think very much that.
What should Boris Johnson do in the next 3 months?
First thing, open, transparent look into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party.
Absolutely.
Wider issue, open, transparent look at the widespread Islamophobia around there in terms of equality and all. Then the equality and rights aspect is hugely important moving forward as a nation for us to be there. Those would be the key things for me straight away. One other thing we've not spoken about is the growth of the far right.
Yes, we have.
I would like to see this government go the extra mile and actually show it means business with the far right, because that is the emerging threat.
And you know, obviously that's something that is important. Having
Yes.
served on the government's advisory group and still do on hate crime, I think that is a very important message that you've sent. I hope so far, you know, today's discussion debate, and I'm sorry that Anwar wasn't able to join us at the beginning because of her other commitments, but I'm really glad that she did join us eventually and shared some thoughts with her. Yusuf, who's come all the way from Manchester in this atrocious weather. Yusuf, thank you very much for coming. Have a safe journey back. May Allah take you back home safe and sound to your family and your children. This obviously is not the end of this particular debate and discussion. This discussion is going on in every home, every community at this moment in time. How this government's going to respond. I think we as a community need to wake up and see how we're going and where we're going next. This is something that's going to be you know, touching us on a day-to-day basis forever. Thank you for joining us. Hope you found the program interesting. Inshallah, we'll be back next week with you, and then we'll have a good break. In the meantime, take care. May Allah protect you and be with you, and make dua for all of us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.